Bom, vamos então começar na esperança de que durante a sessão mais pessoas, entretanto, cheguem. Boa tarde, sejam todos muito bem-vindos. Conforme foi anunciado na divulgação desta sessão, iremos falar em inglês para termos uma língua de trabalho comum com os nossos convidados. So I would start first to give a short presentation about myself for those who don't know me. I am an artist and a researcher in contemporary art, and in 2013 I started my postdoctoral research, which is entitled "For a Reflective Practice of a Conversable Art in the Public Domain." Conversable has to do with conversation. The word in English is not so used, but so practice of art based in the act of conversation in the public domain. Thinking that conversation, an act of conversation, doesn't need always to be based in written or spoken words, but there are other ways of how to have a conversation. And since then, since the beginning of my postdoctoral research, I became member of the Center for Comparative Studies of this faculty, and I am also a member of the research center CIEBA in the Fine Arts School of the University of Lisbon also, which is in reality the faculty which hosts my research. And it is as a member of SEC, of the Center for Comparative Studies, that I propose this session as part of the activities of the research group TELEM, specifically related to the project of Lisbon Alternative Urban Narratives, which is coordinated by Manuela Carvalho. I am very thankful to the former direction of SEC, headed by Manuela Ribeiro Sanches, for the approval of funding for this session, the possibility to bring our guests from Italy, and also to the current direction, headed now by Fernanda Mota Alves, for the actual necessary readjustment so that it could be now carried out as planned. Thank you, Manuela Carvalho, for being receptive to my proposal and always for trusting in my choices. Thank you so much, Raquel Lima, for all the careful support in the organization of this session. Thank you also to Moirika Recker for the poster designer and also for the support in the beginning of the organization process. Giusi Campisi and Luca Bertoldi, our dear guests, thank you so much for so willing accepting the invitation to come. And to all of you who came here today, your curiosity brings meaning to this session. Thank you very much. So about our subject. As mentioned before, the idea of doing this meeting is framed in the research lines of the project of Lisbon Alternative Urban Narratives. As it is said in the text of its presentation, available in the website of SEC, this project aims to reinvigorate discussion of arts practices by framing them within architectural, political, and urban contexts, and at the same time address the built environment in the expectation that new possibilities for social interaction, communication, and creative expression will emerge. Peripheral zones influence central positions on the cultural system, and vice versa, ultimately influencing identity formation. We intend then to focus on these urban areas by mapping emergent community-led and do-it-yourself cultural interventions in the public space in order to understand how they are gradually assuming a more visible and central role in urban cultural life, and by identifying other possible spaces for social and cultural encounters. We will pay particular attention to the contribution of different social, ethnic and artistic groups and minorities, alongside the analysis of performative practices. The team will look at how literature, cinema and photography represent these peripheral lived or appropriated spaces and their potential impact on society. This research will privilege an inter-arts and comparative perspective, referring to theoretical questions crucial to our understanding of the contemporary cultural polysystem. Our methodology will also encompass an ethnographic component featuring a reading of the city from below. We will use as reading tools performance studies and theories of walking and writing the city. A performative approach will allow us to read and explain the diversity and lived experiences of the urban space and to analyze simultaneously culture produced and disseminated through official channels, as well as apparently spontaneous artistic and cultural interventions, whose process of production and promotion does not fit into a conventional structure. It is in this combination of both cultural offers that one may find a more extensive and innovative way of understanding the diversity of impulses of the urban space, which are a result of planning at different levels and decisions made by its permanent or temporary inhabitants. If it is of your interest, then you can find a longer explanation about this project, this research project, as I said, in the website of the Center for Comparative Studies. It seems to me that the work that Giusi and Luca have been developing can bring us an interesting, fruitful and pertinent way for a reflection on what can be urban alternative narratives in European cities today, taking artistic practice as a tool for its questioning and understanding. Giusi studied scenography in the beginning, so this is only a short presentation about our guests, because in fact I'm not so much of the kind of mentioning the degrees in schools and things like that, because I think it's more about the way how people think and act that they can tell about themselves. But so only to give a short, mainly a short context of your field of work, your field of practice. So you started, Giusi, by studying scenography, and you worked, and I think you still working with theater, as a stage and costume designer. Since 1997, you founded with another artist the Suzie Wong Project. And from here you began a series of collaborations with artists and no-artists involved together in artworks from the design phase to the production of interventions. This approach represents a constant in your work since then, giving rise to a set of projects planned in the social space and return to it for a use that is part of the work itself. Doing some research about your work, I found somewhere something about the Suzie Wong Project Collective, which says is an investigation into the unfamiliar surroundings in the art world, with the intention to see how art can arise in relation to the concrete living conditions of certain specific contexts. Many of the projects have originated from the encounter with the world of work the individual responses to the social duty. I found this interesting somehow also for our subject. About Luca Bertoldi, you come firstly from a degree in engineering architecture, and then you studied also fine arts and curatorial studies. Your work is developed in situ. Do I say it like in situ? And your research investigates relationships between spatial patterns and the effects they have on bodies, reflecting on the political nature of space formations and their impact on the social history of places and communities. The urban context is offered as opportunity to explore the physical, psychological, and social conventions as well as a place of action. Your actions are both organized in informal and institutional situations and aimed at subverting the control and communication devices. Also searching something else about your work, I read that you are interested in space and its representations on all scales: a territory, a bedroom, a neighborhood, a city, a slit. Your work fits directly into the reality and creates an ambiguous relationship between it and its representation, comparing different places with the same gesture, or bringing elements of a speech into another, or using art to legitimize site-specific projects, or by synthesizing multiple temporary meanings belonging to different registers in one piece. In 2013, you both founded the Museu Wunderkammer in Trento, a collection of urban imaginary, about which you say is an artist action that proposes a questioning of power relations that cross the city. The commissioning institution scene is the form of our action, a short circuit that allows you to open a critical reflection on the conflict between the establishment and the city, between the territorial policy and the individual imaginary. A political speech, then, that questions the relationship between public and private in the time of cognitive capitalism, in which the private sphere is continuously in value. The idea is that you will start to say something about this project, the Wunderkammer Museum. And from there you go to where you wish, because I am sure that other projects also that Luca and Giusi have been developing together fit inside our subject of urban alternative narratives. And the idea is that we will have a long time also in this session when you wish to open the conversation to your side and to do a more participative exchange of ideas, and so as you wish. Thinking about when can a narrative in urban context be called alternative? I immediately ask myself, when I hear this word alternative to what? That is immediately the question that I put to myself. And I think that if we start from here to develop something which is alternative to something else, we really need to start to be aware of that something else from a critical way of thinking. So to be aware, to perceive and to be critical about that existing situation towards which we want to create an alternative something. So whenever there is an alternative, it involves a choice. For me, this is a very interesting metaphor, this idea that if there is an alternative, there is the possibility to choose, the free will. And this is something that I find in your work. So the possibility that is given to people who decide to interact or to participate with your proposals to have their own choice. So somehow we can think that wherever there is an alternative, there is the possibility of an exit somehow. And I think this is enough from my introduction, and I give you now the word and the time. Thank you so much.
Fare questo,
Good evening, everyone. We also want to thank you a lot for inviting us. It's really we are really happy to have the possibility to speak about our project for several reasons. Also because we are artists and not researchers, and a kind of project like this, it's really difficult to find a real place to expose or to tell a project like a museum or a public project. So maybe a university or research group like yours, Teleme, can be a really important approach to public art and to support public projects. So thank you very much, Marta, for inviting us, and Manuela, and all the staff. And I just wanted to say something about these 3 hours together. We wanted to start explaining a bit what is the project in a general way. So the origin of the museum and of also our relationships. In the second part, we would like to tell you some actions we made, which are maybe I think are really good to explain what we think about alternative narratives. So I think it's these are 3 actions, and we are going to, in several scales. The first scale is it will be a room. The second scale it will be a quarter, and the third scale is a city project, more or less. And at the end, we would like to open the discussion. We brought some contributions, some papers of some intellectuals and researchers. We met and we tried to translate for you. and we think it could be interesting to try to create some relationships between these papers, these contributions, with Lisbon. We don't know nothing about Lisbon, so it's also a way for us to start the approach. In a new city, also to understand a new city and to understand what we can discover about it. And we would like a more horizontal way of discussing, so it's really open to everyone. Yes, this is our steps. These are our steps. So we will start with a general introduction of the museum.
Good evening to everybody, thanks. I will read, but not for too much time. It will be not too much boring, I think, but in this way I will sure to tell what I want to tell so about our museum. So Luca Bertoldi and I are both artists, interested in developing research and work on the subject of urban space as a product of social collectivity and as a place that defines the development of our lives today. We met 3 years ago, and this first meeting resulted in the creation of the Wunderkammer Museum as a collection of imaginary related to urban spaces. In our city, Trento, a brand new science museum had recently been opened with a whole new quarter, both of which designed by Renzo Piano. In an area quite close to the historical center, which had previously housed the famous Michelin industrial plants. Today, this kind of procedure is quite common. The construction of a cultural center that provides motivation and justified wide-scale real estate speculation. Urban regeneration often leads to swallowing up communal space and the marginalization of the poorest citizens. This kind of strong procedure has stolen from the citizens of Trento around 100,000 inhabitants, a huge potential public space which is now owned by private companies that have created a center for imaginary and cultural events that have been so successful that in 3 years since the Science Museum opening, Trento has become identified with from its museum, in a similar way to Bilbao with its Guggenheim. Now we can show you a short video about that area for understand.
Okay.
That's a replay.
Trento è diventata più grande, ha cambiato confini e si apre al futuro verso ovest. Nasce un nuovo quartiere, una Trento tecnologica nel cuore della Trento storica, dove i nuovi luoghi dello shopping e del tempo libero, gli uffici e gli appartamenti, sono costruiti e organizzati in modo razionale, con tecnologie avanzate e altissimi standard di sostenibilità. E dove abiterà anche la cultura, con il prestigioso Museo della Scienza. Vieni a conoscere il volto nuovo della città. Vieni a vedere Trento. Lealbere.it.
It was a video of 2 years ago, but now the quarter is the same. In the same situation, is desert without inhabitants, absolutely in the same way. So So it seems time to reflect on the cultural imaginary and events in our city, focusing especially on the cultural aspect. Another important suggestion comes from a book written by the Italian philosopher Giorgio Agamben, a short essay entitled In Praise of Profanation. In this book, Agamben develops a reflection on a fragment by Walter Benjamin, Capitalism as a Religion. Capitalism does not only represent, as in Weber, the secularization of the Protestant faith, but is in itself a kind of religious creed that generalizes and absolutizes every field as a religion, where sacrifice marks the transition between secular and sacral. All that cannot be used, because it is sacral, is handed over the consumption or to performance exhibition. In Agamben vision, the museum is the place of separation, of impossibility of use. The whole world is today becoming a museum. A museum can be represented by a whole city, like Évora or Venezia, a whole region, a natural park or oasis. However, in a more general sense, everything can become a museum, because the word museum indicates an exhibition of an impossibility to use, to inhabit, to experience something. In this way, in our vision, the museum has a symbolic value. It is a place where the analogy between religion and capitalism become evident. But when did everything begin? Where do we find the museum before the museum? Its beginning, the time in which a direction was taken that brought us here, but where other possibility existed. If we try to find the possible and mythical origin of the museum, we find two fundamental places which inspired us and gave us a space for interpretation in our practice: the Wunderkammer, or Cabinet of Curiosity, and the Addizione Herculea of Ferrara. Wunderkammer, or cabinet, is an expression that belongs to German language, which is used to indicate particular setting in which collectors were used to keep collection of objects of extraordinary allure. The phenomenon of Wunderkammer became widespread between the 16th and the 18th centuries. In this period, the Cabinet of Curiosity moved from being the unquestioned kingdom of the collector to extraordinary rooms available for select visitors to be experienced, where the collection of naturalia and artificialia, once classified and ordered, was exhibited. What interests us about the concept of Wunderkammer is, on one side, its specific experimental and multicultural value, especially in connection to periods in which art, science, and natural philosophy mixed in a still medieval approach. On the other side, we value the Wunderkammer as the origin of the museum. We embrace the Wunderkammer as in between a sacred past, where memorabilia were collected, and a present characterized by scientific classification, and between the private realm of the room and the public of the exhibition. And what is the Addizione Herculea? Addizione Herculea, instead, is a work of urbanism that appeared in Ferrara between the end of 15th century and the beginning of 16th century. The work was first of its kind in Europe because of its extension and organic quality. At that time, Ferrara was essentially a medieval city with a nucleus of narrow and curvy street and without a square. It was Hercule I that started a urban ambitious project to double the city based on a rational principle. The project was assigned to Biagio Rossetti. According to the geographer Franco Farinelli, it is with the Addizione Herculea that for the first time the project of the city is designed from a map, whereas before it the map was just used to detect the existing heterogeneity of the medieval city. Also in this case the city and its drawing live the experience of a duality as the Wunderkammer. For us, the city still has this potential. It is complex and despite all totalizing efforts, it continues to remove itself from one representation. The city grows from stratification of imaginary. In this sense, the city still allows us to experiment conflict. As example, the conflict between the nomad and the completeness of the space, between territorial policies and individual imaginary. Museu Wunderkammer starts from this imaginary and thought. At the beginning, it was just for two of us discussing about it. What is now formed. Okay, but in order to articulate the project of this of the museum, become more bigger the group, and our staff become more big. And now we have some contribution in differita, how we can tell in differita on video. From our staff, three of them. One is for the first Carlo Maiolini. He is a biologist and he works in Science Museum in Trento. Another one is Luca Melchionna. He is a journalist, but cultural journalist for Marta and some another museum, in art museum especially. And the third contribution is of Cristina Mattiucci. She is an architect and a researcher, and she works in Soprintendenza e Belle Arti in Napoli. This is Carlo.
Giusi just asked me to explain in a few words why I decided to join Wunderkammer. I imagine that Giusi or Luca or some other member of Wunderkammer already told all the interesting things that are in the project, the dematerialization of a museum, this different view on public spaces. So maybe I can add that I joined Wunderkammer also for money. In fact, working in a museum, in a real museum, I saw that since 2009 a lot of cultural initiatives and projects was obsessed with money, fundraising, and so on. What I love about Wunderkammer is the total absence of money and fundraising, and that's it. Bye.
during the late 90s and at the beginning of this century, when new large museums were being built in former industrial cities as a way to restructure themselves, there was a roaring debate, and in a sense there still is, about the relationship between the cities themselves and those museums, between the collection, the temporary exhibitions, the archives, and the building. And also in the case of very famous architects, between the role of the museum as a territorial landmark and its new status as a dot in an imaginary landscape of the architectural achievements of that particular architect. I don't have the possibility of going into that debate. I am not an architect myself. I work in communication, and one thing struck me about this debate, which is the question: are museums mainly about content or about architecture? Now, I have come across all sorts of answers, which ultimately, it seems to me, boil down to this: museums are a lot of different things for a lot of people, and they should learn to accept these multiple layers. The complexity is a source of richness, and as such, it should be embraced. I'm not saying that I necessarily agree with this vision, but this is something real. Museums are indeed more and more understanding that they can be a lot of different things for different people. They can be a storehouse of knowledge, they can be a place where experts gather and discuss things, they can be a distribution channel for local artists, they can also be a glamorous environment for corporate events. They can be an element of urban development which enables real estate prices to go up. If a museum is about many things, then it is at the same time about the building and the architecture and the contents. Later on, during the last decade or so, I also came across another debate which is not commonly associated to that about architecture in a museum, but in my view it should be, and it is the growth of digitization. Prices have gone down, technologies have exploded, and it is now possible to upload hundreds of thousands of contents from our collections to Google Cultural Institute. But should we? Well, any answer that we provide to that question must take into account what it is possible to do with these tools. Just one example. The British Museum has produced an exhibition on the Google Cultural Institute, which I don't call a virtual exhibition, because it is not, it is just an exhibition called 500 Years of British History. Hundreds and hundreds of objects told the story of 500 years of British history with a complexity and a sheer size which would have been unthinkable in the physical spaces. So the question is, going digital lets you curate objects in ways that size and geographical limitations of the museum as a building would make impossible. But this again calls in the discerning powers and curatorial abilities of the staff. Of course, with the added complexity that there is a new power exchange mechanism in place between the local staff and the experts at large and the stakeholders and different audiences that either visit the museum or relate to its contents online. So the question is, there seems to be a conflict between the museum as a building and the museum as a device for curating content. How do we behave? When a conflict arises, one needs to have a position. My personal position is that we should resist the temptation to think of this as a naturally new conflict. We should better think of this in terms of continuity and learn new skills to work with without worrying too much. While everything has changed, there is no denying that, nothing really new has happened. Museums have been struggling forever with these issues. As institutions, they already have accepted long ago the idea that not everything happens in the exhibition space, and not everything that has meaning because it stems from an exhibition display, an accrochage. Museums produce books, catalogs, meeting with artists, debates, residencies, all sorts of things. What are these programs and actions if not attempts to go beyond the constraints of architecture? And on the other hand, museums have always tried to escape, to exploit, the architectural values of their buildings to produce better content, opening new venues in carefully selected places outside their main venue, using public spaces such as gardens or thresholds, selling objects. The museums have started selling books, design objects. What are these actions if not attempts to break free from the constraints of content? So the architecture on the one hand and digitization on the other hand, or the digital, are polarities that museums can employ to go on what they have been doing, not so much to renovate themselves, which of course they have to do, they always have had to renovate themselves, but rather to go on doing what they always have done in ways that are relevant to a landscape that has changed. To be a revolutionary, you need to learn and employ the language of tradition.
Okay, we've got a third contribution.
We can show after the third one.
Because there are these three different phases of the museum, of our project. The first one is the independent one, so no money. This one is about the virtual, so no place, real place. And the third one is about the city. So maybe we can introduce later the third one. The city.
How you can see this is the first public part in the museum, no? Beginning too, and immediately we try to find a person to do the stuff together, no? Our action is an artistic, public, and independent action, and citizens can take part to it in a different way. They can participate to the action, the workshop, and the theoretical meetings, or they can donate pieces to the museum collection. The frame of the action is one of a museum, and each initiative, typical of institution, is interpreted critically from the creation of the collection to the exhibition. For example, inviting the citizen to propose an acquisition to the museum, which to stress the ambiguity of collection mapping practices born from participation. In our case, the donation of the artwork has a double meaning. On one hand, it is a sign of appropriation of the public heritage from the donor. On the other hand, is the delivery of personal perspective and of subjective content to the wider public, who might assign it a value. But let's take another example. An activity that is more and more common to cultural institutions is the Art Residency. The intellectual and the artists have always moved in order to produce their work, widen their knowledge and their networks. The artistic residence subtract the experience from this active operation, separating it from its context, while putting in a specific format with rules and with a supervised economy. In this way, the residency became part of the circuits of consumerism and exposition. Through a grand tour, our kind of residency, Wunderkammer invited to reappropriate the experience of the residency, removing the rules that normally shape the interaction between the artist and the intellectual. And so, this the end to the origin of our museum for understand something about this, and I think we can see the third one contributor.
Luca and Giusi have already introduced myself, and I'm part of the group since the beginning. Let's say I'm very proud of it. When they asked me to say something about our work, our action, our projects, I shifted from the part of me who is an architect, part of the group, let's say, who shared deep the project, to the other part of me who is more focused on research path, to design a research path under the project, to understand which kind of hermeneutical path we still live and explore it. And if I have to say, one of the key factor of our work and our experience is the public space. Probably you have already discussed it with Giusi and Luca, but I would like just to point out 2 or 3 points that I give you for your discussion, live discussion. That is basically the capacity, or as well the aim of our work, to overcome the domain of public space as it is usually described and used in the narrative about city citizenship, with all it means now. So it involves political and social and economic processes, and sometimes the action are able to fix that processes, opening to another possibility, that is a tactical possibility, because it hopefully to new interpretation, not only of the spaces in itself, but of our being and acting in the spaces, following what is inner the possibility to have the space as a battleground, as a battlefield. This word came from some specific research me personally did, but also all the literature about the urban tactics, for example, with the Spanish point of view, understand the public space as a battlefield. And in this sense, Wunderkammer play its position in its battlefield, opening a new battle. It means, for me, opening other vision, acting to say something and disappearing to let people do something. And I think when I think about it, not only about the more spatial evident action, as the ones that you have probably already saw about the ex-industrial area in Trento, where we perform several things that were not linked to the possibility of the function of that places, that is the main topic in the public discourse, but also going behind the function to do something with our body. In a sense, the powerful action of the project show people other possibility of the public spaces. But it happened not only with the more evident spatial activities, but also, for example, with the imaginary, shifted imaginary, as in the case of Fausto Iaio memory project, and Luca and Giusi probably have shown it to you. because in that sense linked the contemporary city to a city of 30-40 years ago, a political possibility of 30-40 years ago, opened the political sense of acting and being in contemporary city. In this sense, I guess there are some of two open paths of the Wunderkammer as a common point to all our action. So I hope it's a good point to start your discussion, maybe with the images they will show you, and have a good
So, okay. After the build the stuff, we begin. Of course, it was necessary to have the site, the website for our work is so our building, the site, no? Our architecture, and we begin to have a collection because the museum need a collection, and we ask to people to donate some exemplars in the city, and we take some object for our collection too. For example, we can see something sempre le albere, the Science Museum, for example, have this particular, you can see it is a mistake. No, is an architectural mistake. Marenzo Piano was wrong here, and this is our for speak about the Museum of Science. We take a little detail and tell about the mistake of this building. No, in generally.
Okay. Or for example, we just asked to several institutions. Other museums like the Historic Museum to donate something to us, and they have chosen this Liberty statue. Of course, they couldn't really give us the piece. The real point of this donation and of other donations is that we could arrange together a place where this piece could be public. So this is in a library. Usually, this sculpture is not public, and we could arrange this in a public space for 1 year or something, and they have chosen what to donate to us, what to give to us. Other collection.
Participation to the people is always very difficult. It's not enough to have a website and ask, so give us some place, some memory, something for our museum. It's a long work. For example, this artwork give us an old woman who always go to a center for old people, and we stay there a long time and ask to them to become our info point in the city, and so I think we work with them 3 months, about 3 months, for have this kind of the relation. All they are here in the info center.
It is really interesting because in the website, if you are looking for some info point of the museum, you have to go there, and they really maybe they understand, they can tell you something about the museum, but in their way, on what they just understood about this, and this is really interesting to discover a city, a really interesting way to discover a city and people in the city. And some of them some of these people gave us some perspectives, some points of view on the city, and to collect in the museum. The point of the collection is what would you really put in a collection of a museum of your city? What is so important to be exhibit? And there are several points of view, of course. Other, maybe we have a lot of collection. Ti viene in mente qualcosa?
È un po' complicato, a bit complex.
Okay. Or for example, this is a garden, not public garden, really a secret garden. No one knows where it is, but we discovered it. I mean, someone wanted to give this garden to the museum, but we couldn't really sign the entrance. So you know that there is a secret garden somewhere, but it's in a way performative. You are in that quarter, you know there is a secret garden, but you can't really access to it because it's a secret garden. And
Speak about the project.
Okay. Now I would like to speak about some actions we made. We call them actions of the museum, which are define actions is a bit. We like actions as for defining our work because there are a lot of things together. The museum language of exhibition or residency, workshop, or these things, but it's also a long-term performance. The museum is a long-term performance. We decided we are a museum, so each things can be understood in several ways. This is one of the first we made, and we discovered a chapel, a closed chapel in Trento. This chapel was not sacred anymore. Can we say sacred? Okay, here you can see the chapel. There is a really dark history about this chapel because Trento has had this saint called Simonino, a young boy who was found dead in a river really close to this chapel in the 50. In the middle of the Renaissance period, and as you know, I don't know if you know, but I don't know. Trento was the city of the Concilio, the first Concilio of religious Concilio, in the same period, and they decided to the church used this history of that boy to make the Jewish people away from Trento. From this concilio, Trento started to be started to change his architecture and his with several pilgrims trips. with this iconography of the young saint and the Jewish people torturing him until the 60s, where an historian discovered that it was just a fake, and the saint was not, and the church realized also that it was a fake, and the city remains with a lot of fake imaginaries that changed the point of view of Christians in the city and all these things. And this chapel was dedicated to this year San Simonino, and was closed for a long time, and we could open it for the first for our first exhibition of the museum, and we just wanted to show the place. So it's it was not a real exposition with artworks, or better, with artworks that could show the place in a different way, like these three. You can see maybe on the bottom these three huge bowls with water. And it's a really simple scenographic mechanism of Leonardo da Vinci that an artist made for the exhibition. And in this way, we could have a specific light on this place, on the history of the saint on the top. So we open it. This is another performance we made inside, also about ancient scenography. Like the concept was about making wind with this circle. And we exposed the museum as several collection, several artworks of our collection, and you could take it and bring home. The second part, and this is the second opening of this chapel, is for another action called 78. This is the one which Cristina was speaking about before. We started comparing this Simonino, the political use of the saint for the church, with another with a request we had of from a group of citizens. They were trying they are called Amici di Fausto Iaio, friends of Fausto Iaio. These are these two boys, young boys, which were murdered by fascist hand in the 78, and one of Fausto came from Trento, was born in Trento. So this friends group wanted to call a city or a park of Trento with his name, and they were. It was really difficult for them to go through that with the region and the political government of Trento. So they asked to us to do something, and we decided in some way to compare these two facts, historical facts. And for 78 we realized a radio, an independent radio in the chapel, because there is no more an independent radio in Trento. So in the 78 there was, So we could realize that making a net between the university, a radio student, and also Radio Popolare, which is radio from Milano. And we create we made several interviews and several
archive materials. Was possible to listen the radio registration about the first radio registration about the fact of murder of Fausto Iaio. It was possible to listen this archive material and have an interview with the reporter in that day. It was live and of course on radio.
So it is an exhibition, but also it's performative because you could join the radio also with your sound of walking in this chapel. And the other part was a temporary library with 2 collections of books. We asked to 2 different institutions to give us a selection of books, and we asked to a museum, a contemporary art museum. They gave us several we call visual poetry. I don't know, it's really, they have a really nice collection about that. And also to the library, the city library. They made these 2 selections, which made the mix of them make this library unique. And for us was really interesting. And also we had an exposition of the classmates of the two boys who of Fausto Iaio, so an exposition of the 78. And the third of the library was the presentation of a new of a book. I can't remember the title of the book, but
so it was about Marx and Lacan, and so it's something like one eyes on these years from now, no? Something so. The 78.
Yeah. So it was interesting to also to get this chapel, to make this chapel the real work for us. The real goal for us was to make to change the imaginary of the chapel, because it's like an empty space right now, and it's not. It was a synagogue before the chapel, of course, and then the church made the chapel, and then it was empty. It was an empty space. It is an empty space waiting for a new imaginary to on it. Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
If you want to speak into, if you have some question for now, if you want to tell something, we are open to stop in every moment. Don't need to,
we can
to
go on.
listen.
I would suggest from the images of the collection of the museum. Would you like to choose some to ask about it? Because I was curious about some of the donations, and I would like maybe to.
Yes.
Very interesting.
I don't know if you want devotion, the one on the.
Devotion here.
Okay.
Oh, this was long work. We have a strange relation with the archaeological office in Trento, because yes, it's very strange. One is because a woman who works there is in our staff, of course. But the director of that office, he very like our work because he see in this something that archaeological thought. Have a meaning for archaeological thought. For example, the fragmentary of the city, the detail, the look to the detail, and so for this we begin a collaboration in some situation with them. One artist, especially Davide Alieri, in residency to us to Wunderkammer. Did a long work with them and non ce l'abbiamo la traduzione di questo, especially a photographic reportage of the work in a laboratory. And this is one of the photo. All the reportage is in archaeological office and is a part of our collection. You have
part, maybe.
That refugee, what it's about.
Okay. This is someone gave it to the museum. Some of the old people of the center, because it was also a secret space where, as he was a child, he could he used to go there to play, but then with the war. He could go there with the whole family, so he was the key for the family to protect themselves and
From bombs, of
yes. So, and he just donated. It's unfortunately they are not translated, but it's really nice to read also the words they use to explain these places as artwork. At the end, yeah.
So the text that we see about it is given by the person.
Exactly.
Who gave the
Exactly. If they don't want the typical schedule of our of the for example this is the history of the University of Trento, for example, with several The schedule is made of a first part, which is the description, objective description, and then the acquisition. Why should this stay in a museum? And also, in this case, there is the place where this artwork is in the city, like in a room of a museum, and. I wanted to. Okay, I can't. And there are also other details about the work. I don't know why. I can't see them now. Okay, maybe. Sometimes people want to donate a place or an experience of the city to the museum, but they don't want to describe it, or they don't want to. They are, I don't know, they are shy, or they. So we find someone different, maybe an intellectual or an artist, or to explain the acquisition or to do something in the place, and we build relations between them. So there, and some of these things, some of these places are interesting just to us, So, and we wanted them in the collection. We took them.
Volevo cercare la sirena che ha un sonoro.
Okay. For example, we have also some of them are sounds.
Sounds.
Yes. For example.
Sirena là.
Okay, this. Exactly. Exactly.
In this case, we ask to a friend who is a musician to describe this sound
in a really technical way, so you can, because it's a trace of the war, also, and of the also working period, productive industrial period, and there are a lot of
Studio di Petra? What about
so Studio di Petra is a painter, a Finnish painter who lives in Trento, and the studio is always close to the public.
You can.
You cannot see. So it was a way for us to try to give to her the possibility to open his studio, but she never do it. And it will always stay close and nothing more.
So if you want to visit this this part of collection, you have to call us, and we try to fix an appointment with her in her place.
It's a really interesting place, because when you go inside, for example, you cannot understand where you are, because she is Finnish, but she feel Russian too, because her origin. And so when you go inside, you can find only some photo of Karelia or something of that region. It's like another place in the city.
What is that acquisitions or acquisitions?
This is this is about the action I explained before, the first opening of the chapel, and it was yes, we just made this installation with the acquisitions we made until this point, and someone of the staff just told us, we should make an acquisition of this acquisition to remember also the place, and this is why.
And this segreto di Stato?
This is a movie that was Trento was a set of this movie in the 49. And it's very fun because Trento is, in the movie is not Trento but Strenna, a capital of Balkanic country, and so there which don't exist, and the only thing that is possible to see, like scenography in the city and inside the movie, are some big letter. Insegna, come si può dire? Signs in the city, nothing more. For the rest, if you want to see some little part.
Maybe just a...
Sì, vado. Una cosa così.
Questo film dalla campagna elettorale, ma le elezioni sono considerate con un certo scetticismo dagli osservatori occidentali. E questo perché di fatto non esiste alcuna opposizione al generale libero. Si prevede che...
Okay, we just cut the parts where you can see Trento in this film, in this movie. Yeah, okay.
And about, so we can continue about some another action.
If you have other...
One.
This is another methodology, another action we made in a quarter, not really in the city of Trento, but close to the city of Trento, in a small town, and a museum asked us to work on this quarter. So it was really difficult for us because we didn't know nothing about them. We had no net, and it's not our way of working. And we had really few time, just 1 month to organize the thing. We discovered that this quarter was rebuilt in the 70s in in a utopian way. So it has no private green places. It was just all green in the quarter is common. Also, the school have a huge park, and it was thought as common for the whole quarter. The quarter is called Rione 2 Giugno, and it's close to the huge lake. So we started with this point of view of the utopia. If you see the quarter right now, there is no more green, because in 30 years, 40 years, they made a lot of filters, and they close all this green. So there is no, it's the death of the utopia of the 70s, and we decided to make like a performative assembly, public quarter assembly. We invited we started with a group of people which are professors or intellectuals or also friends, and they are used to work in a participation way, with participation in their works, and we discuss how they could act like they were proposing to the quarter, like in a public assembly, like an institution, political institution, how they could propose to rebuild the utopia, so to remove everything from this, I don't know, cancello, of these filters. Barriers, yeah, thank you, yeah, barriers. We organized this public assembly in the quarter. We started with an urbanist, a political, and with a researcher, or history researcher of the place. They were agree to propose this project to remove barriers, and of course they were agree that it was like a show, and it was obvious that it was a show for the quarter. The important point was that the public, which the people, the citizens of the quarter, which was the real subject of this action, could maybe this time say something also in a show. Usually this way of participatory assembly made for the politics are not really free to discuss the project. Usually in Trento, in our region, in Italy, the politic decided already what to do, and then they say, okay, this is a participatory project because we organize a public assembly in your quarter, but then they won't change nothing about the project. So we made the same about the removing barriers, but in this time the people of the quarter were really interesting because they started to discuss about their problems, of course, not our problems of the barrier, but really real problems of the quarter. And so it was really interesting, this limit between reality and fiction in a performative way. Then we asked to a musician to make something for the end of the assembly, the show, and he started to play these barriers of the school, and with a lot of people all around starting. So it was really nice in the quarter, really nice, and this was the conclusion.
So in this way was a way to answer to the museum that invited us, for example, to work in a quarter that we don't know, and why they want to go in a quarter to work, because now it's needed to do something, so no, and we play this in a real way, and show to the people, look what we do, the museum do, and so government do with this fake assembly, no?
Do you have some video document with sound from the performance?
Yes, it's in Italian, of course. So
but we can understand, I think, or we understand something of Italian.
Yeah, it's a teaser because it's really long.
Utopia è quello sotto. Deve essere prova?
No, secondo me hanno fatto questo.
Proprio sotto. Perché non c'è? I don't know why there is not here.
Maybe from
Vimeo.
Vimeo on the top.
Like on Vimeo?
Yes.
Yeah, but
eccolo lì.
we used to have there. Maybe
sull'asse viario verso Arco.
Il piano urbanistico voleva coniugare edilizia popolare e servizi ai cittadini, coinvolgendoli nella progettazione grazie al Consiglio di quartiere. La performance di Museu Wunderkammer è iniziata con la formazione di un gruppo di lavoro formato da persone che utilizzano la pratica della partecipazione nella loro professione e che in modo collettivo ne hanno deciso la forma pubblica. L'argomento di utopia è l'utilizzo, da parte delle istituzioni, della progettazione partecipata come strumento di produzione del consenso.
Utopia prende la forma di un'assemblea aperta ai cittadini nella piazza del Rione. Durante la performance le persone del gruppo di lavoro in veste di relatori o di pubblico hanno interpretato se stessi e nello stesso tempo hanno assunto dei ruoli fittizi.
Partner del progetto Remove the Gate, che in tante parti d'Europa oggi stanno rimuovendo i cancelli e le inferriate e le cancellate. Potranno dare il loro contributo. Intanto rassicuriamo anche le persone che si potrebbero un po' preoccupare di questo tipo di processi. Questa sarà una partecipazione che non disturberà l'ambiente pubblico, una partecipazione non sovversiva, incamerata dall'amministrazione, come dicevo prima, in un modo costruttivo.
È un percorso lungo, gli orizzonti sono ampi e non ci sono partecipazioni create dall'alto, progetti definiti, è un progetto in divenire e quindi la partecipazione comporta cittadini attivi.
Anno per anno ci siamo scontrati un po' con la dura realtà, diciamo, perché se inizialmente gli spazi attorno alla scuola erano previsti come spazi per la cittadinanza, spazi verdi aperti, ci si è resi conto che questa era così una somma, non era utopia.
Sembra che questo passaggio che stiamo performando oggi è fondamentale. In fondo l'amministrazione, gli esperti, i ricercatori stanno proponendo di ritornare al futuro. Io sono Mauro Milanaggio, sono stato incaricato di moderare questa performance in forma di assemblea pubblica. È un'iniziativa di Wunderkammer, collezione di immaginari urbani, insieme al MAG del Museo dell'Altogata. Il titolo di questo progetto è Utopia, l'abbattimento delle barriere, delle cancellate che separano gli spazi dei servizi di questo quartiere. Questo è solo un primo momento di presentazione del progetto.
Okay. It was also interesting to see that some people of this quarter didn't want to join this kind of situation. Also, if it was a show, they were really jealous about the quarter and the public activity. So it was really difficult also to relate with them. Not. Okay. The last action we would like to present is called mobilità sociale, social mobility, which is made in this huge void you can see here. It is right on the other side of the new museum we saw at the beginning, on the other side of the river of the Adige. This huge void hosted before concrete fabric, one of the only example of industrial history of the city of Trento, and they had to erase it because of unsane or some unsane place. And now there is this empty space. So it's this empty space is really huge, like a quarter in the city, and it's no one can go inside. It belongs to the region, and there are a lot of barriers. So we started working on this place, on the empty of the city, especially just walking through that, just to go into that, thinking about some rules, like if there is a way to go inside, there is another way to go outside, which is not the same, for example. So this made us, gave us a lot of possibilities to discover the place. And we started to use it with some activities, normal activities that people do in Trento in the weekend, like the picnic. So we organized a picnic with friends just to start. And it was really comfortable as a way, as a place for have a picnic. Really,
Ecological.
And this was the first part. So for the 2 summers ago, for the 3 months of the summer, we just started to use this place in a lot of different ways, listening to different imaginaries of people who were joining us. The point here was not to fill the place with something like a new museum, like on the other side of the river, but just to do, just to act, just to go there and act, also in a performative way. So, for example, this was a concert we organized in wireless headphones. But other things more related to the city and to citizens of Trento was we realized a camp, so you could sleep there and play there with these children. And someone suggested us we should this wall could be a really good wall for climbers. So we asked to a professional climber to open the trip to go there, like this, the via. Mm-hmm. Thank you. And then we realized a workshop, 1 month workshop of ceramic, and so each week we went there to realize these several tools, like in a primitive way. Because there is nothing, and then at the end we made a sort of party to cook them with the oven, yeah. The really interesting, there are a lot of interesting things about this, but also that you need other people to colonize this place, because there is really nothing. So if you want to bring something, you have to bring with hand, and you cannot go there with a car or a bicycle, because you really have to jump a barrier to go inside. So and also for us, we used to invite people as museum to come to occupy this place for this.
So you took the initiative to create different kinds of strategies to access the place. So it's a huge area which is out of function, quite near the center of Trento, and empty. So people usually they don't go there. So it's mainly about to create strategies of access.
Yes, and the point was also that the future of an empty scale like this is in the hands of institutions, not of citizens. And like citizens were waiting for a destination for this, like I don't know, university or something like that, and not using it in this temporary time, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years, where there is nothing, and is an opportunity if there is nothing. So we wanted to we wanted to use imaginaries for this place, but without gentrify. So without to build something, just temporary imaginaries, just to say, okay, you can do what you want, maybe also what you do normally in your street, or maybe more than this. Want to say something about it?
No.
Okay. Yeah.
Proposing the alternative narrative, but still there's a lot of institutional conversations you have to deal with, like in space. You probably had to ask authorization to use that political level in Tokyo that you invited. So how is what kind of limitations you find during this process, and what do you have to open from your initial proposal? Will you have to rethink or reconfigure to still do your work? Because there's always some formalities and...
Okay, in this case, we didn't ask to no one to go there. So it was an occupation, it was illegal to organize this. But it's like no one disturbed us, and we didn't disturb no one. So, and in some ways, more people you are, more you can legitimate what you do if you are more than two, and so no one say nothing about this. But of course it was illegal. So if people wanted to join us in this kind of experience, they had to take the risk to come. And for Utopia, the only real fake of these characters, and there were characters in the assembly, in the conference, but also in the public. So we could organize some questions also to the debate, to make the debate working. But here the only real fake was the political figure. So this in white jacket. He is an urbanist, and he played as urbanist, but he is a urbanist. She's a researcher, and she played as a researcher. He's a professor, and he played as a politician. So it's really, we don't we work with cultural institutions, but not with political. We are independent from that.
Only yes. For example, the man in white, he's a professor, but work a lot with a big program in participation. And he wanted to do the political in this situation. He asked to do this role because he is very hungry with the political limit he always find in his work. And so he wanted to play. So it's important for us, no? Because always his party. For us, the public there, or the men in white, are always citizens that participate at our work, in our work. Abbiamo risposto alla domanda.
It was the answer, the right answer. Okay.
And also this experience of working with informal situations or more institutional situations is part of your work, as I understand.
Yes.
So this kind of flexibility, and it's a kind of exercise to see how these proposals can work with more institutional support, or the opposite, or both together, or it's a challenge.
He always liked to find the point of conflict, and for example, we are a fake museum, and it's interesting for us if in one situation we have a lot of situation just now, we are called real museum, and this is interesting because we think maybe the fake can show, like in theater, of course, can show something about the real, and for at last we are more real than real, and adesso siamo pazzi. No, but it's funny, and it's our satisfaction, of course, is to be absolutely in some situation, like in mobilità sociale, no? We only can do what we imagine, but it's more interesting the point of stress, critical stress, when one museum called us museum.
Yes, for example, in the first, in 78, this collection of books is really, it's not common. They don't give you these books. These are all art books. So we had to made like all the bureaucratical papers, like a museum does to borrow these books, and it was really funny for us, really complicated because it's not easy to get something from a museum, but also really funny because it was like the performance was more real than what we could imagine at the beginning.
The comedy of it, because in relation to imaginary museums almost, or possibility museums, there was this BBC radio program called the Museum of Everything, which people would donate, they had guests, and the guests would donate an object for the museum, and it would be like the universe, or then he would describe why the universe and why does that matter, or a mathematical equation. And so I think that there's always a humorous element to this almost imaginary museum, immaterial museum.
It's the Stefano Mirti project, no, this one.
Actually a BBC radio program.
Okay.
There's
really cool.
Museum of Everything, there's also a program there.
Yes, they come from the design world, this field. Yes, I think many the archives, for example, the way to archive and to do a new collection is something contemporary. For example, so we have the big archive, it's internet, no? And of course. And this is a theme, and this is very easy to approach the people. If I ask to them, so let's do a collection together, give us artwork. So it's not easy, that is not enough, a site, a website, but the same, it's easy to understand for the people, and we need like public artists to have a contact very friendly for understand each other and work very easy together in the beginning. For this we select this way form too.
I see more than just a digital archive, because the people who donate the works are themselves archives. They are also participating in sort of living archive, which makes it kind of interesting, participatory project. A museum. It's a museum that is in a way digital, but it's also the people who participate, donate or participate in your events, workshops and installations are part of all this sort of archive, which is kind of like a system constantly activated. You see quite there or not. You just see the archive is just the digital complement of the museum. Then I have some comments about the museum, but just I was thinking about that.
Yeah. Of course.
Just a silly question. How do you organize the items? Is it by chronological order?
Yes, it's chronological. The last one was this. So it's just chronological. Then there are some keywords we decided, but right now I think our staff member of the website, the graphic, it's changing something. So there is, we wanted to, like the video is not anymore here, but he works sometimes and we don't know. So I can show you what I wanted to show. But yeah, there are some it's more specific, and there are also keywords like curatorial selections, like I don't know, fakes, and if you can see just the fakes and you can develop your trip through the city if you want, and just in like fake expositions of the museum, or there are some keywords, but the visualization is just chronological.
Volevi aprirgli la pagina delle mostre, magari c'è qualcosa che mi interessa. Un workshop, non abbiamo mai parlato.
Okay.
I should particularly thank you, actually, because when I wrote my PhD thesis 10 years ago, it was on Wunderkammer, and I was actually stating that the Wunderkammer was working as a cognitive frame for definition of the contemporary age too, and as a sort of change that had awakened human brain in a definitive change from the ancient time to nowadays. So you're actually demonstrating that it works for the contemporary. And I was thinking about a lot of parallels in this opposition of dimension that are included in the identity of the Wunderkammer. And it really works well nowadays in a different new way, corresponding to the new identity of the city. Because I was thinking that at that time, at the beginning of the phenomenon, what a person who was looking for entering a Wunderkammer was an experience. Well, nowadays it's the opposite, because we are so full of experience and we are looking for places to share the experience. So it works exactly the opposite way. And on another point of view also, what is touching me is that this represents an inversion of the way of looking to the city, because we start from a place where there was a sort of specific focus on the world and trying to find a way to disperse the glance and to surprise ourselves with what there was inside the world. Well, right now we start from a dispersive perspective, and we're trying to look in an organized way to something and find an order that can tell us where we are. So I think that the symbolic functioning of this museum and the way it works and why it's successful is just because it represents a very concrete way of living reality and seeing it.
Yes. Thank you very much for your point of view. It's really interesting for us. Yes, there is this. The Wunderkammer was also a private collection. So the relation between it was a proto museum. So in the history of the museum, there was at first the Wunderkammer, like of the collector, and he was a private man who could travel a lot all around the world and picking things and for his and displaying this for his guests to make to build an experience as you told us for his guests. And in some ways we realize that today there is something between private and public related to the city today of museums. Usually museums want to share something with the city in a public way, but at the end it's just an experience and really controlled, so not really public. It's still. So yes, we were thinking a lot about this passage, also to private, from private to public, and from public to private. Also because we don't. The museum doesn't own nothing, so we don't have a materiality of the collection, so it's impossible to buy something of our collection. It's just ephemeral, and it's a way to be definitely a public museum or public Wunderkammer, because you can use them in the material way of the Wunderkammer maybe, and also to experience them. You have to, as you in a right way, you told us, you have to share with someone else this kind of experience, because it's just a pretext, excuse to do something with community.
C'era qualcosa di interessante da mostrargli che non
abbiamo Wurm questo.
No, abbiamo fatto vedere i workshop.
Okay.
Wurm questo ne abbiamo raccontato in effetti.
We have also all these are taken from the museum dramatic. So we organize also our actions are also workshops. For example, for in the region there is no art schools, fine academies. So it's a huge absence for us. So we try to organize some workshops with artists and intellectuals about aesthetics and about art. And also this was
also this was we invited a collective, a group, Wurmkos. They are a group of artists with mental problem and no, so are mixed. And for us it was interesting to call them to be a teacher in the city, because normally so the crazy don't teach to the other one. And so for us it was interesting, this point of view, and we think of course we can learn from them a lot of things. And Wurmkos are a group that work together about 20 years, something like 20 years. We did this workshop because it was 1 year of workshop inside the place of mental health in Trento. Normally are places that people from out never experience, and for that time they open the door and work with the crazy. So at last volevo dire che c'era un lavoro alla fine, ma mi sono persa. There was a work made together in the workshop, and now is in one of these place is a door all decorated. Forse nella collezione, no, la collezione non ce l'abbiamo.
I can't find it. Ok, questo. Forse. One year residence for this group was really hard to yeah, for us because they are a lot of people, and because Trento is not a city maybe which it was not easy to find people to join the workshop, and once a week for 1 semester. But yes, we are really happy because we could make normal citizens enter into mental ill places, several places, 3 places actually. Yeah, and for example, they gave us. They donate to the museum this. I mean the mental hospital, illness hospital. They wanted to realize Starbucks, like a real Starbucks inside the mental illness. Of course, they couldn't do the same, but they made this fake. And they started a small bar for them, just for them, and yeah. For example. And
it's the moment of the
public
debate.
Yeah, but we brought some papers. But do you wanted to say something?
No,
I'm sorry.
No.
Okay, no, you started. We brought some papers. We wanted to have the debate with you, but maybe it depends because we are maybe, I don't know, tired. It depends. I don't know. But they are really interesting, so we are happy to leave these papers to you. These are 3 papers made of. One of our workshop was about contemporary archaeology and the limit, the border. So we made a group of artists and researcher and we met 4 times, and each time there was an intellectual philosopher. There was philosopher, architect. Yeah. Who else? Anthropologist and
Anthropologist.
Okay, and the curator once. Yeah, it was really interesting, and from this research part, we could organize mobilità sociale, this activity. So this one. We had the idea during this research part, so we thought that maybe it could be interesting to use the same research net we organize in Trento to understand Lisbona that we don't know, or one specific place of Lisbona, and that would be a really horizontal way to work. I mean, these papers are all about what is the border. They are really short, but what is the border, and also in time, respected to the time of the city, because the contemporary archaeology is seeing as past something already just from yesterday. Sì. Possiamo distribuirli?